All right, so we're going deep on GPT-4 today. You shared this research paper and some excerpts with me. And it seems like GPT-4 is, uh, everyone's talking about it. And yeah, for good reason. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the stuff it can do is just wild.
Yeah, it's definitely a big step forward, you know? For a while now, I've been following all the advancements in AI, and this is a big one.
So I guess our mission today is to try and unpack all of this for our listeners, pull out the most interesting stuff from these sources, and figure out what exactly is it that makes GPT-4 so special.
Yeah, sounds good.
So first up, GPT-4's skills. One thing that really caught my attention was its coding ability. The paper mentions it can actually pass coding interviews on leak code. Like it can solve these really complex problems, and it even goes through multiple rounds of the interview just like a human applicant would.
Yeah, and it's not just about like memorizing code or anything. GPT-4 is showing us it's really got a deeper understanding of logic and algorithms. I mean, it can even write dynamic programming solutions,
Wow.
which are pretty efficient. And this all suggests a level of problem solving that's way beyond what we've seen before in AI.
Right. It makes you wonder, like, what does this mean for the future of software development?
Yeah.
If an AI can do the tasks they used to be,
Yeah.
only done by human programmers.
It's a good question.
And speaking of skills, did you see the part about GPT-4 cracking passwords? It was able to reverse engineer a program just to figure out a password. And that seems like a pretty impressive grasp of security concepts.
Yeah, that's a great example. It highlights how GPT-4 takes this very pragmatic approach to problems. You know, it's interesting to compare it to ChatGPT, which the paper says refused to do a similar task because of ethical concerns.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that raises some interesting questions about how these different models are like thinking, or at least how they approach making decisions.
Yeah, the idea of an AI wrestling with ethical dilemmas. It's
Yeah.
definitely something to think about. But let's move on to another one of these really cool schools, image generation. So you can actually give GPT-4 really detailed text instructions, and it can create an image based on what you tell it.
Right. The researchers gave it a pretty funny prompt, actually. They told it to create an image of a frog hops into a bank and asks the teller, "Do you have any free lily pads?" The teller responds, "No, but we do offer low-interest loans for pond upgrades." And GPT-4 created this image with all those elements.
Wow, so a frog, a bank speech bubbles. It's almost like having an AI illustrator right there whenever you need it. What are the potential real-world applications for this?
Oh, the potential is huge. Like, imagine combining GPT-4's image generation with other image synthesis models that already exist. The paper suggests that GPT-4's output could be used like a detailed sketch for these models, and that could lead to even more sophisticated and controllable image creation.
That's a game changer for like
Oh,
artists, designers, anyone who works with visuals, really. It'd be like having an AI partner to brainstorm and refine ideas with.
Exactly, and we're just getting started here.
Okay, hold on, because it gets even more impressive. GPT-4 can also compose music. It can follow musical instructions and even create harmonies.
It's not just simple tunes. The research shows that GPT-4 can understand different musical styles and compose for various instruments, which opens up all these creative possibilities in an area that we usually think of as being very human.
Right, so we've got GPT-4, coding, cracking passwords, generating images, and composing music. Is there anything this AI can't do?
Well, its abilities are definitely impressive. But let's move on to its mathematical skills next, and we can see how it does in that realm.
Let's see if GPT-4 can solve for X in real-world problems.
I think you'll find this next part pretty interesting. The paper goes into detail about how GPT-4 can solve word problems, and it seems to be really good at it. For example, it was given a problem about calculating population growth over a certain amount of time, and it solved it perfectly.
So it's not just crunching numbers. It's actually understanding the context of the problem and applying the right formulas.
Right, exactly. This all shows that GPT-4 can understand the little nuances of language, extract the important information, form equations, and then apply these logical steps to arrive at the solution.
Okay, you ready for this? The paper also describes how GPT-4 can tackle Fermi problems. You know those thought experiments where you try to estimate something like how many piano tuners are in Chicago.
Yeah, they seem like just kind of whimsical questions,
Yeah.
but they actually need a really deep understanding of logic, and you got to know how to estimate things well.
Right, and GPT-4 was able to solve a Fermi problem about estimating how many Fermi questions are asked every day. It approached the problem really systematically, making logical assumptions, and using order of magnitude reasoning.
It's so interesting to compare this to ChatGPT, which, when it was given a similar problem, just gave up. And this difference really highlights GPT-4's advanced thinking skills.
Wow. So not only can it code, create images, and compose music,
Mhm.
but it can also think like a mathematician. Is there anything this AI can't do?
Well, even with all of these incredible abilities, GPT-4 is not without its limitations, and that's what we're going to explore next.
Okay, so we've talked about all these amazing things GPT-4 can do, but it's not perfect, right? It
Yeah.
still has weaknesses, and we were talking about these limitations before, like how sensitive it is to the context and even the phrasing of a question.
Right? Even small changes to how you ask something can lead to totally different responses.
It's fascinating. GPT-4 doesn't understand things in
Yeah.
the same way that we do.
Yeah, it's like Eagly. It can play this really advanced language game, but it doesn't necessarily get the meaning behind things. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that's why this thing called prompt engineering is so important. It's about figuring out how to write the right questions and instructions
Yeah.
so you can guide GPT-4 toward the answer you want.
So it's not like you can just have a casual conversation with it, like you would with a person,
Right, you got to be a lot more precise.
with how you communicate with it.
Exactly. It's more like working with a really brilliant
Hmm.
but literal-minded assistant.
And that reminds me of another limitation, the inner dialogue thing. The paper gave some examples of GPT-4 struggling with tasks that require like step-by-step planning.
Yeah, GPT-4 is amazing at generating text.
Yeah.
Then it can't really plan ahead or go back and revise its approach, like a human would.
It's like trying to write a story without being able to outline it first.
It's exactly.
So it's really strong on fluency and creativity, but it seems to be weaker when it comes to strategy and logic.
Yeah, and that really highlights the difference between how GPT-4 works and how humans think. We can jump back and forth between different ways of thinking, logical, intuitive, creative, but GPT-4 seems to be more limited to just its pattern recognition strengths.
Right? It shows that even with all these advancements, GPT-4 is still very different from human intelligence.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that difference as we talk about the potential impact GPT-4 could have on society. Just because it can do certain things really well doesn't mean it understands the bigger picture or the ethical implications of what it's doing.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement about these new capabilities and forget that. We're still dealing with a machine.
Right. And some of those ethical implications have come up in the discussions about misinformation and manipulation.
Yeah, like that example from the paper where
Yeah.
someone was able to get GPT-4 to create anti-vaccine propaganda. And it was really convincing.
Yeah, it's a serious concern, especially as GPT-4 gets even better at sounding like a human.
It makes you wonder if we'll even be able to tell what's true and what's fake. When AI can create content, that's basically indistinguishable from human writing.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And we need to start thinking about solutions now, ways to detect this kind of misuse.
Maybe we need new tools that can identify AI-generated content.
Yeah.
Or even better, we need to teach people how to be more critical of the information they see online.
Yeah, we need to give people the skills to be really good critical thinkers, especially in this new online world.
So misinformation and manipulation are big worries. But what about bias? The paper talked about how GPT-4 can reinforce gender stereotypes, even when it's not told to do that.
Yeah, those experiments with the recommendation letters, they showed how these models can just absorb the biases
Right.
that are already in the data they're trained on.
So they're picking up on societal prejudices
Yeah.
and then repeating them without even realizing it.
Right, and it seems like it's up to us
Yeah.
to teach GPT-4 to be fair and unbiased. We can't expect it to just figure that out on its own.
Exactly. We need to be really intentional about how we train these models.
Yeah, we need diverse data sets and better techniques for identifying and reducing bias.
So AI ethics is a huge area that we need to think about right from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about misinformation, manipulation, and bias. Now for the big question that's on everyone's mind, jobs.
Mm.
Is GPT-4 going to take all our jobs?
It's a question a lot of people are asking, and I get it. GPT-4 is capable of doing a lot. It can code, create images, all things that humans do for a living.
But I'm starting to think that it's not really about GPT-4 replacing us, but more about us learning how to work with it.
I think that's an important point. GPT-4 is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It all comes down to us and how we choose to use it.
So instead of being afraid of losing our jobs, maybe we should focus on how GPT-4 can help us be more productive and creative.
Right, it's a more positive way to look at it. There will probably be some job displacement, as there is with any new technology. But there will also be new opportunities that we can't even imagine yet.
So it's about adapting, learning new skills, and staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly. We need to become lifelong learners and embrace all the possibilities that AI offers,
It's not about being afraid of the future. It's about shaping the future.
and making sure we use these advancements to benefit everyone.